Hey guys, it's Nicole. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe. I like to post about books and music, mostly Taylor Swift. So this month, I think I TBR'd a little too close to the sun. I had a very ambitious October TBR that I posted on my Instagram, and it was full of all these spooky books, and then just things got crazy. And also I got chosen for this like book promotion on TikTok, and it was like due by the end of the month, but they didn't give me the book until like the end of the month. So that was like the last book I read in October, and it was just, everything went to hell basically, but that's okay. I still have like November and December. I'm going to hit 100 by the end of this year, which I've never done before, and that's insane to me. But yeah, I have not done a reading wrap up in a couple of months, so I'm going to be updating you on everything I read in September and October. Not quite the spooky stuff I expected I would be reading. I just got really behind on things that I thought I would finish in like the beginning of September, and that's really unfortunate. I'm going to very quickly breeze through the Warriors mangas that I did finish in September. So this one was 4 out of 5 stars. It ended up being one of the longest ones, and I actually thought that was a good choice. It like went through a full year, and it had a great plot and timing, and also illustrations. Sometimes I feel like the mangas are kind of fast because they're very short. This one was 3 out of 5. It was boring and predictable. We'd already seen this plot play out in the main arc of books, so it felt a little redundant. It was from a different perspective than the main arc, but we know how it ends. I don't even remember these at this point, if I'm being honest with you. I'm looking at my notes. This one was kind of sad also, but yeah, couple a sort of sad book with a plot that you already know, and 3 out of 5, it was just like okay. But the illustrations were really nice, and that's why it's 3 stars instead of 2. This one was also 3 out of 5. This was again something that already happened in the main arc and then retold from a different perspective. I loved the character Nightpelt. I don't even remember who that is anymore. I didn't realize how much of a hero he was, and I guess he complements the character of Yellowfang so well. Of course, I remember Yellowfang, one of my favorite characters. God, it feels like I read this book so long ago. Okay, so this book I got sent to me. I think I got paid to promote it on Instagram, but I can't remember at this point. It might have just been gifted. Anyways, this was a very heavy book. It's 2 high schoolers, and there's issues of domestic abuse. I feel like I need to censor that word on YouTube, but whatever. It was easy and entertaining to read, even though the subject matter was really heavy. Kind of like Good Girl meets Bad Boy. There's some undertones of Wizard of Oz. There's kind of like a thread of the theme of Wizard of Oz running through it, but overall it's like not really a retelling or anything. It's its own story. The dialogue is very much 2 teenagers talking to each other, like they're in a relationship. Like it's very much like in contrast to the kind of John Green books where the teenagers are very like precocious and maybe don't talk like teenagers, which has been a common criticism of his. In this case, it's like, wow, they very much feel like 15-year-olds. Like it reminds me of how I was when I was 15, like how actual teenagers are. Borderline cringy, but the other parts of the writing were really pretty. So this wasn't really reflective of the author's capabilities. It was just like her choice to make the dialogue between kids a little bit melodramatic, a little cringy. But the other parts of the writing, there were like some really nice metaphors. It was like kind of lyrical. The plot wasn't too great, and so I figured the sequel may fill in some holes. I did really enjoy this book though. I rated it a 4 out of 5, and I ended up reading the sequel right afterwards, and that was not something that was gifted to me. I bought that as an ebook on Kindle, I think. This was so long ago at this point. I like that this one was based on a true story. That's the author's boxing instructor told her. And so next I read Signs of Life, which is the sequel to that last book. It also said that there's going to be a 3rd book, but this sequel was published in 2016, so I don't understand when the 3rd book's going to happen. It's such a cliffhanger at the end of this one, so it's very frustrating. Read at your own risk because there is no resolution yet of a 3rd book. Still 4 out of 5. It was very interesting, and I like the writing style still. It reminded me a little bit of If I Stay, which was a book I recommended in my last booktube video. Again, very heavy subject matter dealing with abuse, particularly like domestic abuse, so content warning. This one kind of interspersed a few Wizard of Oz quotes, but it was mostly set against a Faulkner work, As I Lie Dying, which is appropriate for the plot. I don't want to give too much away because it's like you need to read the first one to kind of understand this one. Kind of crazy. The girl, Dorothy, her parents like pissed me off so much in this one. Okay, next I read Powerless. This was also a book that was gifted to me to promote on Instagram. I think it was Instagram. This one was so good. It was dystopian, like apocalyptic. Basically what happens is in this town in New York, there's like a power outage, but also none of the cars are able to be started. Like it's a huge, I think of what I think people anticipated Y2K to be. Like everything programmed was like not set to be programmed after the year 2000. So just nothing was working. Nobody was able to use their cell phones even if they were charged. Cell towers were out. Power was out. Eventually they lost running water. This one was was so interesting. It was 4 out of 5. It was interesting because the power outage was less of an apocalyptic dystopian scenario, except for the beginning, and more of a vessel to show how shitty people can end up at the top through taking advantage of situations like this, like time of crisis, you know, billionaires become richer, things like that. It was kind of sleazy the way some people are just, but I think it's realistic the way people take advantage of something like this. But it also showed like how a family can grow together, and also as individuals. There was a lot of character development for people in this one. The dialogue was very natural and flowed really well with the writing style. I loved the plot. As I said, good character development, really like fleshed out characters. They all had such distinct individual voices. But yeah, there are some creepy men in this book, and I think that's just how things happen. You know, if they have something they can offer people, they're able to kind of like get what they want in other areas. It was gross, but it was really interesting and well written. Then I read Remy versus Rome. I have this one right here. I promoted this on TikTok. This is all I did, like sponsored books. That's why I wasn't able to read like my actual TBR. This is already dusty. I just got this book like last month. This was so good. Like, I think I rated it 4 stars. I did, but it was very close to 5, maybe like 4.5. So this is a romance. Isn't this cover just so adorable? It takes place in Rome, and this girl goes to Rome after her engagement is broken off. Her name's Remy, and she goes to Rome to kind of find herself. Like, that's the place where she had her first kiss, and she hasn't been able to get this like Italian boy out of her mind. So she like views Rome as a very romantic place. So she goes there to find herself, and then she goes on a date with this guy and ends up getting entangled in this like crime ring. Honestly, that was not the main part of the book I was paying attention to. I was just so in love with the romance because it was like forced proximity, because he is a detective and she needs to stay like close to where the police are so they can clear her name and see if she actually had anything to do with this crime ring, or she really just was an unsuspecting girl going on a date with this guy whom she didn't really know. So she has to stay in an apartment very close to his, and then she ends up wanting to take an active role in trying to find this crime guy. They're basically trying to steal ancient art, I think it was. Honestly, as I said, I was not paying attention too much to the crime part, but it was filled with pretty interesting history and culture. It's just, I loved the romance so much. Oh, it was good. I already kind of want to reread this. I don't know. I read it when I had COVID in September, actually, and it was one of the greatest decisions I've ever made because it was very escapist and very atmospheric. I felt like I was in Rome, which is where I would have rather been while I had COVID. So much pasta dishes were described in this book. It made me hungry. The twist that happens in this is a little predictable, but I also feel like that's indicative of this genre. I don't think it's the author's fault. I think people read these types of books for comfort and knowing it's going to end with like a happy ending. Very cute romance book, perfect for this cozy escapist romance genre that's been really popular since the pandemic started. Lorenzo, the guy's name is Lorenzo. He's one of my favorite book boyfriends now. Oh my god, I just move over Edward Cullen. Adorable, truly adorable and so fun, and a gorgeous cover. I hope this author continues to write in this genre because I'm curious to see what else she does. Okay, next I read Still Alice, which was a book my mom recommended to me because she had to read it for one of her nursing classes. She's gone back to get her bachelor's, so she had to write some paper over this plot. It was 4 out of 5. It's basically about this woman, Alice, who is diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and she's only 50 years old, and it's kind of sad. I kept comparing this book to the lyrics in Coney Island. Looking for you, but you're right here. It taught me a lot about Alzheimer's because I didn't realize it's not just you forgetting things. It's like your brain literally starts to forget how to do things, like how to swallow and all of those things, just like very involuntary mechanisms that we take for granted. She forgets that her house is her house. Like, she gets lost in her own house that she's always lived in. It's very sad, but it's interesting and informative. I like that it was told from Alice's perspective because as it goes on and as her Alzheimer's progresses, you can see it in her narration, and she kind of becomes a little bit of an unreliable narrator, and the scenes become very disjointed because she doesn't remember what's happening. It's like she's coming in and out of consciousness as time passes. Yeah, it was really good. The movie's also really good, but Kristen Stewart does a terrible job portraying her daughter. Julianne Hughes plays Alice, and she carried that movie. 4 out of 5. Next, I read a book about Ukraine. 5 out of 5. It was called Country Profiles, Ukraine. It was kind of like aimed at children. I was just trying to find some books that explained Ukraine a little better than some other books I've read on Ukraine that are full of propaganda, and this was a pretty good one. It mostly just described culture though, like food, clothes, music. It didn't really talk about current events. A little bit it touched on like 2014, and it was written in completely accurate language. It didn't beat around the bush and call something softer than what it actually was. I really enjoyed it. Very beautiful pictures of the cities in Ukraine as well. Okay, next we're going into the novellas of the Warrior Cats series. This one was 3 out of 5. It was okay. We kind of already know what happened at this time, so it was more of a recap. 3 out of 5 again. It was all right. This had like question questioning of religion in it, which I always thought was pretty interesting in this series because everyone is so like dedicated, but some cats sometimes do question things. 3 out of 5. This one was really engaging because it was very short compared to the other ones, but it was only the beginning of like the entire story, and it ends on a cliffhanger, and I think the entire story is told through the main arcs. But like, what was even the point of this? It was just the beginning of a story. It felt like it was really gearing up for something, and it was just packed with plot, but because it was only the beginning of a story that took several books to tell, it was very engaging. There's a family that gets broken apart in this one, and I found myself really wanting to know what happened to them, so I had to go and Google it because the stories don't really tell you, which is weird. This was 3 out of 5. It was okay, nothing we hadn't seen before. A lot of these novellas are unfortunately retellings of things that already happened in the main series. This was a weird perspective and a weird tone that painted out the craziest villain in this entire series, Tiger Star. Like, he was misguided or something when it was definitely him being manipulative. You don't just accidentally become a dictator, basically. Like, that just doesn't happen. But we know from the main arc that was showing the scenario from other cats' perspectives that he was being very manipulative. This was just in his own head, and he thought he was doing the right thing and he was being a good person, but that's no. It felt like it was trying to get us to sympathize with him, and I didn't really like that. 4 out of 5. This one feels like the only one that doesn't repeat what another book or arc already tells us. This was the entire story of how Leaf Pool, ThunderClan's medicine cat, had kids and then basically pretended she didn't and like put them off on her sister and pretended they were her sister's kids. It was crazy, the freaking drama. That entire arc in the main series was like a telenovela. It was just so soap opera-y, but yeah, I always wondered how did they do that, and this explains everything very concisely, and I really like that, so it was 4 out of 5. This one was 2 out of 5. It technically should have been really good because it filled in the gaps between the arcs, a lot like the previous book I just talked about, but something about it was just really uninteresting, and the climax was pretty dull. You know, sometimes books are like, whoa, oh my god, and then it's like a resolution, but this one was just like, you know, the climax wasn't really a climax. Not a very strong plotline or conflict, and it seemed too long. Even though this book was 110 pages, this one was so good. It was 4 out of 5 and had such an interesting villain. Oh my god, it was like a villain origin story. And honestly, I did sympathize with her. Like, I can never find myself sympathizing with Tiger Claw because he was full on like Hitler. But this one was, it's kind of like those old ghost stories of like, oh, this woman haunts this land because her baby's drowned or something, or she can't find them and now she's a ghost and she's constantly looking for them. Just very much that energy. It was like spooky and creepy. And they tell this story to like the kittens in the camp to scare them, and this was kind of like spooky season oriented. I find myself defending this villain after reading this. I didn't really know much about her up to this point, and I don't think any readers really do unless I just forgot a bunch of stuff in the main series. This explains a lot about why the great battle with the Dark Forest happened. If you've read the series, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go into detail because that would just be too long. This one was 3 out of 5, interesting and spooky. It was about a medicine cat, I think it was in ThunderClan, who had this gift that no other cat has had before. He could kind of like predict someone's future, I think it was. It was dark and hopeless since this cat, Goosefeather, he knows what will happen to his loved ones, he knows how they will die, and he cannot do anything to interfere with that. So it gets a little depressing. It was interesting. It was like early ThunderClan history. This is way before the main books are set. 3 out of 5. We finally got to see what happened with Ravenpaw after he got chased out of ThunderClan by the Hitler cat, Tiger Star. Because the clans left the first forest, he wasn't in the main arcs anymore at all since he stayed in the other area. It was kind of sad. I'm not going to spoil it, but yeah, we see what ends up happening to him. I liked how committed the author was in portraying this character as gay, despite, like, it's very like coded, but she is dedicated, even though I guess her publisher does not want her to do that because they have a market in Russia, and they would not have a market in Russia if there was any kind of character in a children's marketed book that is LGBTQ. So nothing about it is explicit in this book, and it even refers to them as best friends in the end, but like, we all know, and the authors have talked about this in interviews. Spotted Leaf's Heart. This one was 3 out of 5. This was the cat that Firestar, like one of the best characters in the book, who is the first character in the very first few books, he like falls in love with her. I didn't realize how old she was, and this book kind of tells you. It also had freaking grooming in it. This was weird. This was really weird. This showed events that happened in Blue Star's Super Edition. Super Editions are like very long standalones in this series, but it was from a different perspective, and it wasn't that bad. I liked that it had Spotted Leaf's perspective because she died in like, what, the very third book, So this was like back in time. Pine Star's Choice, 3 out of 5. It was okay. It could have been more interesting because the concept was pretty interesting, but just it wasn't executed well. I did kind of like how we got to see his perspective though, just because a lot of cats were so awful towards him and made it out that he was like selfish for this decision he made, when in reality he was like thinking about the people he left behind like every single day. Yeah, he couldn't take like the rough lifestyle of seeing his friends like dying. So it just showed a new side to that situation. Thunderstar's Echo, 3 out of 5. It was sweet, and it successfully turned this one character, Lightning Tail, into like a saint character, like this perfect cat who everyone loved and was the ideal best friend. The relationship he had with Thunderstar ever since they were very small was very cute and detailed, and it just made me really sad. What happens in this book? No spoilers. And the last book I read in October was Token Black Girl by Danielle Prescott. This was a book that got sent to me to promote on my TikTok. There's just a lot of these this month. I promise there's only one for next month, and I'm gonna get back on like my TBR that I posted on my Instagram, but this one was so good. This is a book that I feel all white people need to be reading. I actually don't want to rate this one because it's like a memoir, and I feel like that's not, especially because I'm white, and obviously it feels like I'm rating her explanation of racism, which I'm never gonna understand. She reminded me a little bit of the character in The Hate U Give. It's basically about Danielle's upbringing in a predominantly white and elite community in, I think it was Connecticut, somewhere in New England, but she was the only black girl in her friend group, and like refers to herself as the token black girl, but she's like a retired token black girl now. Like she is no longer trying to fit into this white group. She tolerated a lot of crap from them, basically. She grew up only like 20 miles away from Candace Owens, who is a very interesting person on Fox News, and she kind of breaks down how terrifying it is to think that she could have ended up like that if she wouldn't have deconstructed her own hatred of being black. So the first half was kind of like The Hate U Give. It was a lot of breaking down of racism because she herself was trying to become more aware of it. And then the second half was very interesting because it like discusses how this obsession with appearances in her white friend group, and everyone was like obsessed with these designer things, and this was like late 90s, early 2000s. Things were rough then. I mean, they're still rough now, but like, God, the misogyny, the fat phobia, the racism was just like really normalized then. And she talks about that, but also this obsession with appearances. It led her into pursuing a career in the beauty and fashion industries. And wow, that was rough in the 2000s. It made me think of The Devil Wears Prada. The Devil Wears Prada mainly touches on fat phobia and sexism, while, you know, with a black main character, you also add that racism intersection over into it. There's a lot of talking about her ED, so content warning about that. It just felt easy to learn about racism from her firsthand experiences. I feel like that just makes it click easier for me, at least. A lot of breaking down white supremacy. She talks about the white gaze, and a lot of us have probably heard of the male gaze. Everybody talks about that, but I don't think I've ever really seen anyone dissecting the white gaze, and I didn't really know that was a thing, but she talks about that. It's like trying to adjust yourself to fit into this white friend group, and then when she is with her black friends, they accuse her of talking white, and they're not completely comfortable around her. They call her a snob, and yeah, how she still is like portraying whiteness even when there are no white people in the room. Yeah, there are parallels to the male gaze. It was just really, really insightful. I really enjoyed reading a book about this subject that is written from firsthand experience, so you just really feel like you're in their shoes. Reading very diverse books like this, I mean, it makes you a more empathetic person. Reading in general does make people more empathetic statistically, like studies have shown this. Yeah, I think this one is one of those amazing books that will really accelerate that. Okay, God, so we just speed ran through all the books I read in the last 2 months. I don't know, I'm afraid how productive November is even going to be for me because I have a wedding that I'm a maid of honor in. I've only ever been to one wedding in my life, man. I've got a bachelorette party to plan this weekend. Oof, I have to buy Taylor Swift tour tickets. I'm going to that concert. It's just gonna be really chaotic, and then of course my birthday and my boyfriend's birthday are like at the end of November, beginning of December. So I'm probably just gonna wrap up the end of the year, and hopefully I get to everything I want to get to. It's just like a tiny bit over 100 books, so I should be able to do that. Please wish me luck. I only have a few more Warrior Cats books to read, and then I will have read the entire series, and I will get it done in November. I have stuff from the library over here. It's just bad. It's just like really bad. I also have ebooks that I ordered from the library. Spooky season is coming late this year because it's 80 degrees in Oklahoma still. I'm wearing shorts. Yeah, hopefully it cools down and it becomes a little spooky and I can ignore the Mariah Carey on the radio and just have my spooky TBR happen now, and I'll just finish off the year with that. I think that's about all. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read in October. I especially want to know if you read something spooky because I want to live through you, since I obviously didn't get to that section of my TBR. Go check out my Instagram if you want to see what I will be reading this November, because those got pushed back. It'll say October TBR. If you enjoyed this video, video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you want to follow me on my Instagram, it is right here. And if you want to follow me on my TikTok, it is right here. Also, comment down below and let me know if you're going to see Taylor Swift on tour, because I need to know, and I need to know what locations you're wanting to go to, because I want to maybe try to meet some of you there. I'll post about this more on my Instagram stories. But yeah, I will see you in a video very soon. I think I have my Midnight's Manifest Week vlog part 2 coming up, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye, guys.